Patricia was standing in the middle of Claire's living room, pointing at the guest bedroom door, telling a stranger from the moving company, "That one will be ours. Put the boxes marked Master in there." And for 3 full seconds, Claire Donovan stood frozen in the doorway of the home she had bought with her own money, wondering if she had somehow walked into the wrong house. Welcome back to the Family Revenge Tales. Claire had spent 11 years as a flight nurse in Washington state, the kind of job that meant she was awake at 3 in the morning, strapped into a helicopter seat, holding pressure on a stranger's wound while the world tilted sideways beneath her. She had missed birthdays. She had missed her own sleep most nights for over a decade. She had watched people take their last breaths in the back of a Bell 407 while she pumped air into their lungs and prayed the hospital was close enough. The job had given her purpose, and it had also hollowed her out slowly, the way water wears down stone, until one night, after a call involving a teenager who didn't make it, she had looked in the mirror of the hospital bathroom and not recognized the woman staring back. That was the night she decided to stop living only for other people. It took her 4 more months of saving, selling her old car, and working every overtime shift she could get. But eventually, she found it. A modest cabin on the edge of Hood Canal, wood-sided and weathered, with a porch that faced west so she could watch the sun drop behind the Olympic Mountains every evening. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. It was quiet, and it was hers, bought with a down payment she had earned one bloody, exhausting shift at a time. The day she signed the closing papers, she sat alone on the dock behind the property and cried, not from sadness, but from the strange, unfamiliar feeling of having something in this world that belonged to no one but her. She had barely finished unpacking her kitchen boxes when her phone rang. It was her mother, Patricia. "Claire, honey, wonderful news," Patricia said, her voice bright in the particular way it got when she had already made a decision and simply hadn't informed anyone else yet. "Your father and I are coming up tomorrow. The moving truck is already reserved." Claire set down the plate she was holding. "Moving truck for what?" "For us, sweetheart. We're moving in with you. Into the cabin." Claire actually laughed, thinking it was a joke, the kind of joke her mother sometimes made that wasn't funny, but that everyone laughed at anyway to keep the peace. "Mom, I just moved in myself. We already told everyone," Patricia said, cutting her off smoothly, as though Claire hadn't spoken at all. "The Hendersons, the whole church group, your Aunt Carol, everyone's so happy for us. It's going to be wonderful, all of us together by the water." "I never said you could move in here." There was a pause, brief and cold, and then Patricia's voice changed, dropping into the register Claire remembered from childhood, the one that always meant the conversation was already over. "Family takes care of family, Claire. If you don't like it, you can leave." Claire hung up. She stood in her kitchen for a long moment, phone still warm in her hand, and felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not rage, not yet, but a kind of quiet, clarifying calm. The same calm she used to reach for on the worst calls, the ones where panic would only get someone killed. Years of trauma medicine had taught her one thing above all else. When everything is falling apart, you don't scream, you assess. So she started asking questions. She thought first of her younger brother, Ethan, who had always been the one their mother built her plans around. Growing up, it had been Ethan's soccer trophies on the mantle and Claire's report cards folded into a drawer. It had been Ethan's college tuition paid in full while Claire worked 2 jobs through nursing school. It had been, more than once, Patricia looking at 8-year-old Claire and saying, "You're the strong one. You don't need as much." As if strength were a resource to be mined, rather than something a child should never have had to develop in the first place. Claire had spent so many years being the one who didn't need anything that saying no now, as an adult, felt almost like speaking a foreign language. She called Ethan anyway. "Oh, yeah," he said, sounding genuinely surprised she didn't already know. "Everyone's known for like 3 weeks. Mom's been talking about it nonstop. She posted pictures of your place on Facebook, actually. Didn't you see?" Claire hadn't seen. She opened the app with hands that had gone strangely steady, the way they always did right before something serious. There it was. Photos of her cabin, the ones she herself had taken and shared privately with exactly 4 people. Patricia had reposted them with a caption that read, "Our forever home by the water. So blessed to spend our golden years here with family." 211 comments. Congratulations pouring in from people Claire had known her whole life. Not one of them knew the truth, because the truth had never been asked for. Then came the discovery that turned Claire's stomach entirely. Digging through a family group chat Ethan had absent-mindedly left her in, Claire found it. Her parents had already accepted an offer on their own house. The closing date was 9 days away. They had sold their home based on the assumption that Claire would never publicly embarrass her mother by saying no. The whole plan had one single requirement for success, and that requirement was Claire's silence. For one long night, she almost gave them that silence. She sat on her porch with a cup of tea gone cold in her hands, staring out at the black water, and thought about how much easier it would be to just let them come, to rearrange her life the way she always had, to be the strong one who didn't need anything one more time. She thought about her father's face, gentle and tired, and how he'd probably had no real say in any of it. She thought about how tired she already was of being the person who kept the peace by disappearing into it. And then she thought about the mirror in that hospital bathroom and the woman she hadn't recognized. She wasn't going to become her again. The next morning, Claire called the attorney who had handled her purchase, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Lawson. Rebecca confirmed what Claire already knew. The deed was in Claire's name alone. No other party had any legal claim whatsoever, and Rebecca could have documentation ready within 48 hours. Claire gathered everything: the purchase agreement, the county deed, Rebecca's signed letter, and screenshots of her mother's Facebook posts, time-stamped weeks before Patricia had ever spoken to Claire about any of it. Then, instead of calling her mother to cancel anything, Claire did something Patricia would never see coming. She sent out invitations of her own to the same church friends, the same neighbors, the same Aunt Carol who had liked every single one of Patricia's posts. "A cabin blessing and housewarming lunch," the invitation read, warm and cheerful, the Saturday before her parents were set to arrive. Everyone RSVP'd within a day. Everyone believed they were coming to celebrate a joyful family reunion. Only Claire knew what they were actually about to witness. She spent that Saturday morning setting long tables on the lawn, stringing simple lights along the porch rail, laying out food she'd spent 2 days preparing. She greeted every guest with real warmth, because none of this was their fault, and hugged her Aunt Carol tightly at the door. The afternoon was soft and golden, the water calm behind the house, laughter drifting across the yard. It was, in every visible way, a beautiful gathering. That was exactly what made what came next so devastating. Right on schedule, the moving truck rumbled into the driveway. Patricia stepped out first, dressed as though she were arriving at her own homewarming, beaming at the assembled crowd like a woman stepping into applause she felt she'd earned. She moved through the yard, greeting people, already narrating her plans. "We'll redo the kitchen counters first, and Thomas wants to build a little dock extension." Well, guests smiled and nodded and offered their congratulations. Claire said nothing. She simply watched, letting her mother keep talking, letting every unearned claim land in front of every single witness, because the truth would only be believable once it had something false to stand against. It was Patricia herself who eventually gave Claire the opening, turning to the crowd with a proud little laugh and saying, "Isn't it wonderful? All of us finally together in the home Claire so generously gave us." The yard went quiet in that particular way a room goes quiet right before something breaks. "Mom," Claire said, and her voice was calm, almost gentle, "could you tell everyone exactly when I invited you to move in here?" Patricia blinked. "Claire, don't be dramatic. I'm asking a simple question. When did I say yes?" The silence stretched long enough that people began glancing at each other. Claire walked to the table she'd set near the porch and one by one laid out what she'd prepared. The purchase agreement, dated months before any conversation about moving in had happened. The county deed, her name alone at the bottom. Rebecca Lawson's letter, stating plainly that Claire held sole and full ownership. And finally, printed screenshots of her mother's own Facebook posts, the "Forever Home" caption, the date stamped clearly weeks before Patricia had ever picked up the phone to ask Claire anything at all. "You sold your house before you ever asked me if this was okay," Claire said quietly. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. "We sold it because you promised." "I never promised anything," Claire said. "I found out about all of this the same way everyone here did, through a Facebook post." It was Thomas who broke the silence next, and his voice when it came was smaller than Claire had ever heard it. "Pat, you told me she said yes. You told me you two had talked." "Thomas, you told me she said yes," he repeated, and Claire watched something in her father's face fall away. Not anger at Claire, but a slow, painful understanding of his own wife and of how long he'd simply trusted her word instead of picking up the phone himself. Around the yard, faces shifted. Aunt Carol looked down at her plate. A woman from the church group quietly said, "Patricia, I had no idea," in a tone that wasn't unkind, only disappointed. One by one, small apologies drifted toward Claire from people who had congratulated a lie without ever thinking to ask the person who actually lived it. Patricia, for the first time in the entire ordeal, had no audience left willing to simply nod along. "So where are we supposed to live now?" she finally asked, and there was less command in her voice than Claire had ever heard. "Exactly where you planned to live," Claire answered, "before you decided my home already belonged to you." There was no shouting after that, no slammed doors, no dramatic scene, just a long, uncomfortable quiet, and then the slow, humiliating process of a family beginning to pack a moving truck back up in front of the very people they told a very different story. It left, an hour later, exactly as full as it had arrived. The weeks that followed were quieter than Claire expected. Her parents rented a modest apartment closer to their old neighborhood. Ethan, without his parents' household to lean on anymore, found himself for the first time genuinely managing his own bills, his own decisions, his own life. And to Claire's quiet surprise, he seemed better for it. Several relatives reached out to Claire in the following month, not with judgment, but with a kind of soft, overdue respect. Several admitting they should have asked her directly, instead of simply believing what they'd been told. Her relationship with her father slowly became something new. Smaller, more honest, built now on actual conversations instead of assumptions made on his wife's behalf. As for the cabin, it finally became what Claire had bought it to be. On quiet evenings, she sat on that west-facing porch and watched the sun fall behind the mountains. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, the peace she felt wasn't something she'd had to earn by disappearing into someone else's plans. It was simply where she lived now. If this story meant something to you, consider subscribing to the Family Revenge Tales, because every one of us deserves a home and a life that no one else gets to claim without asking. And if you're standing in your own version of that living room right now, watching someone rearrange your life without your permission, remember this: saying no to what's unfair isn't the thing that breaks a family. It's usually the thing that was already broken, finally being seen. This story carries a meaningful lesson about the difference between love and obligation, showing that genuine family support should always be freely given rather than assumed or demanded through guilt and manipulation. It illustrates the importance of setting healthy boundaries, even with the people closest to us, and demonstrates that doing so does not make a person cruel or selfish, but rather emotionally mature and self-respecting. The story also highlights how silence and passive compliance can be misused by others to justify decisions we never actually agreed to, reminding viewers of the value of speaking up early and directly. Finally, it offers hope that confronting difficult truths, even within a family, can lead not to permanent division, but to healthier, more honest relationships built on mutual respect rather than quiet resentment.